Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into a topic that's making waves, both literally and figuratively. We're talking about the future of our oceans with a focus on deep sea mining.
That's a big one, that's for sure. A real clash of priorities happening right now.
Exactly, and we're going to unpack it all. We've got incredible sources lined up for you, from reports on the ground, or should I say, on the beaches of Cabo Verde, to findings from a research vessel in the middle of the Pacific. We'll also hear from conservationists, industry leaders, you name it. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much better grasp on this complex issue. So, are you ready? Let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
Okay, first things first, we need to understand what's at stake. And a good place to start is actually on land in Cabo Verde, where a sand crisis is unfolding.
Oh, really? What's happening over there?
Well, imagine this. Beaches that were once pristine, absolutely teeming with life, are now, well, they're being stripped bare, literally. Their beauty reduced to rubble.
That's awful. But sand, I mean, it's everywhere, right?
That's what most people think, but it's not that simple. And that's why we're going to hear from Ana Vega. She's a marine biologist in Cabo Verde who's fighting tooth and nail to protect these ecosystems.
I see, so it's more than just looks.
Way more. Her organization, Biosfera, they're seeing the devastating impact of sand mining firsthand.
Devastating, how so?
Well,
What's happening because there's less sand?
Well, for starters, it's destroying the nesting grounds of endangered sea turtles. These creatures have been around for millions of years, and now they're struggling to survive because they have nowhere to lay their eggs.
Oh, wow, I never thought about that.
It's heartbreaking. And here's the kicker. The people who are actually doing this backbreaking work of hauling the sand away, they're making next to nothing.
Really?
It really makes you question who's benefiting from all this, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It's a different story with these new deep-sea mining operations. We're talking big money there.
You're right, that's a whole other scale.
Yeah.
But it also raises even bigger questions, and that's where we're headed next. So let's shift gears from the sunny beaches of Cabo Verde to the depths of the Pacific Ocean, where a different kind of mining is taking center stage. Deep sea mining.
Okay, so we're not talking about sand anymore. What are they digging up down there?
Deep down on the ocean floor, there are these things called polymetallic nodules. Imagine like potato-sized rocks, but instead of being full of potato, they're packed with valuable metals: manganese, nickel, cobalt, copper, the works.
Interesting, so like a natural treasure chest on the ocean floor.
Exactly. And one company in particular, GSR, has created this incredible piece of technology called the Pitanha Through.
Okay, what is it?
It's the world's first deep-sea mining robot. This thing is massive. It's designed to vacuum up those nodules from thousands of meters below the surface. It's a marvel of engineering when you think about the challenges down there, the pressure, the darkness.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine.
Right. But of course, the big question is, at what cost? What will happen to this ecosystem if we start sucking up these nodules?
And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What do we know about the potential impacts?
Well, that's where things get really fascinating. We're talking about a realm that's largely unexplored. That's why this research expedition we're about to learn about is so important. A team of scientists aboard the research vessel Island Pride is out there right now studying the potential environmental consequences of this new frontier of mining.
So they're the pioneers, venturing into the unknown to bring back some answers. What will they find, I wonder?
Exactly. And we're going to find out together. And they're not alone out there. Things get interesting with another group entering the picture, a little more, well, active in their approach, I'd say.
Yeah, Greenpeace. They definitely aren't just sitting on the sidelines watching this unfold.
No, not at all. They're pretty convinced that deep-sea mining is a massive threat, and they're doing everything they can to raise the alarm.
And rightfully so. I think their perspective is crucial to consider here, especially their concerns about the potential for irreversible damage.
Absolutely. And they've pulled off some pretty incredible stunts to get their point across. Remember that time they actually confronted the mining vessel at sea?
Oh, yeah, that was something else. Their ship, the Rainbow Warrior, went head-to-head with that massive mining vessel right out in international waters.
Bold move. I mean, talk about a David and Goliath scenario, right?
Totally. And it wasn't just a symbolic gesture either. Some of the activists actually boarded the mining vessel.
They did. They got on board, and you know what they did? They painted in huge letters right across the side, "Risk."
Wow, talk about sending a message.
No kidding. It definitely got people's attention. And that's kind of their point, right? To put this issue front and center and make sure everyone understands what's at stake. They believe this kind of mining could be catastrophic for the ocean.
And it's not just the immediate impact on the seafloor that has them worried. They're also very concerned about what it could mean for climate change.
Right, because the ocean plays a massive role in regulating the planet's climate.
Exactly. It's a huge carbon sink, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which helps to mitigate climate change, or at least slow it down.
So if deep sea mining disrupts that process, it could actually make the problem they're trying to solve even worse.
Exactly. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline, in a way.
So on one hand, you've got scientists trying to understand this largely unexplored ecosystem, and on the other, you've got activists sounding the alarm, warning about potential disaster. And then, of course, you've got this whole industry that's eager to tap into this potential gold mine.
It's like a three-way tug of war, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
Exactly. So with all these competing interests, who ultimately gets to decide what happens in international waters?
Well, that's where the International Seabed Authority comes in, or the ISA. They're a UN-mandated body, and their job is to manage the resources of the seabed in areas that fall outside any country's jurisdiction.
So kind of like the referees of the deep sea.
In a way, yeah. And it's a tough job, to say the least. I mean, we're talking about balancing economic interests, environmental concerns, and international law. They've got a lot on their plate.
Right. No kidding. So what are the main arguments on each side of this debate?
Well, those who support deep-sea mining, their main point is that we need these metals for the green energy transition. Batteries for electric cars, wind turbines, solar panels, all of those technologies require vast amounts of these metals.
That's true. We do need those technologies to move away from fossil fuels.
Exactly. And they argue that deep-sea mining could actually be a more sustainable option compared to land-based mining, which we know comes with a whole host of environmental and social problems.
Good point. So it's not like mining on land is without its downsides either.
Right. It's not a perfect solution, but they believe that the potential benefits of deep-sea mining, in this case, outweigh the risks. They argue that we can mine these resources responsibly and minimize the impact on the environment.
But that's a big if, right? How do we know for sure what those impacts will be, especially in the long term?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's why this research is so crucial. We need to understand the potential consequences before we go full steam ahead.
Exactly. And those who oppose deep-sea mining are very concerned that even small disturbances to the seafloor could have huge, long-lasting consequences. They argue that we simply don't know enough about this environment to predict what will happen.
And they're worried about things like sediment plumes, which are basically giant clouds of dust that get stirred up from the seafloor during the mining process. These plumes can spread for kilometers, potentially smothering marine life and disrupting the entire food chain.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that.
It's a major concern. And then there's the issue of noise pollution from the mining equipment itself, which can be incredibly loud. That can disrupt marine mammals that rely on sound for communication and navigation.
So it's not just what they're taking out of the ocean, it's the impact of the mining process itself.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It really makes you think about the bigger picture, right? I mean, it's not just about what we're taking out of the ocean, but the impact of how we're getting it.
Absolutely. And those impacts can be significant. In fact, the scientists on the island Pride observed some pretty alarming things after the Britannia II conducted its test runs.
Oh, like what?
Well, for one thing, they found clear evidence of disturbed sediment on the seafloor, basically confirming those sediment plumes we were just talking about.
So it's not just a theory, it's really happening.
Exactly. And it's a stark reminder that even with the most advanced technology, there's always going to be a footprint.
And that brings up another really important question. Do we even need to mine the deep sea? I mean, are there other, more sustainable ways to get these metals we need?
Well, there are people who believe so, people like Alexandra Cousteau. She's a passionate advocate for ocean conservation, kind of following in the footsteps of her famous grandfather, Jacques Cousteau.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize she was related to him. It's amazing to see how that legacy of ocean exploration and conservation is being carried on. But so, what's her take on this? Does she have any alternative solutions?
She does. Instead of diving headfirst into the unknowns of the deep sea, she believes we should focus on what we already have, better ways to use the resources that are readily available.
What do you mean?
Well, she's a big proponent of something called a circular economy, especially when it comes to these critical metals. It's about reducing our consumption in the first place, then reusing and recycling what we already have much more efficiently.
So basically, closing the loop and wasting less.
Exactly. If we can get better at that, we won't be so reliant on extracting more and more raw materials, whether it's from the land or the bottom of the ocean.
It makes you wonder why we aren't already doing that. I mean, that just makes sense.
It does, but it requires a real shift in mindset, a move away from this idea that resources are infinite. And Alexandra Cousteau, she's not just focused on deep-sea mining, she's also a big advocate for sustainable fishing practices.
Right, because that whole industry needs a serious overhaul, too.
Absolutely. It's about moving away from these massive industrial fishing fleets that are just wiping out entire populations of fish.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Remember those fishermen we met in the Baltic Sea, the Maya family?
Oh yeah, their story was incredible.
They made the conscious choice to fish sustainably, even though it meant potentially earning less money in the short term.
It takes courage to stand up to the status quo like that.
It does. But they knew it was the right thing to do. They understood that the health of the ocean was more important than maximizing their profits.
Their story is a powerful reminder that economic viability and environmental responsibility don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the big takeaway for me is that the deep sea, it's not just some vast, empty void. It's a complex, interconnected ecosystem, just as vital to the health of our planet as the rainforests or the coral reefs.
Absolutely. And what happens in the deep sea doesn't stay in the deep sea. It affects us all.
And we're at a critical juncture. The demand for these metals is only going to increase, so we have some really tough choices to make. Do we plunge headfirst into this new frontier of deep-sea mining with all its unknowns and potential risks? Or do we prioritize sustainable solutions that we already have, even if they require us to change our habits and our way of thinking?
Those are the questions we all need to be grappling with, and hopefully this deep dive has given our listeners some food for thought.
It certainly has for me. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey to the depths of the ocean and into the heart of a really complex issue. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those brains buzzing.